Hello and welcome back to the Literary Salon podcast. It's me, Damian, welcoming you to this very special edition. Tonight we are celebrating the launch of the memoir Somebody to Love, written by Alexandra Heminsley. She is the author of Running Like a Girl and Leap In. She's been at the salon before and you can hear her on our podcast. And tonight's fabulous moment of pure joy, she shares the story of her memoir, which is not always joyful. It's in fact incredibly challenging and difficult, but it's the joy of everything working out right that I want to share with you tonight. The best memoirs make you feel like you really know the writer inside and out. That's certainly true of Alexandra Heminsley, who takes her own body as her subject. We wince at every needle as she reveals what IVF is really like, and rejoice with her as she gets the family she's given so much for. When her partner begins to question their gender and starts to transition, this fledgling family is put to the test. It'll have you in bits, in a good way. What you're about to hear is a discussion between me and Alex celebrating publication day for Somebody to Love, which is available in all good independent bookshops now. And a warning to anybody who's listening, it does contain descriptions of medical procedures and also assault. Good evening, everybody. It is 8 o'clock and we are here tonight to celebrate the launch of Somebody to Love. An absolutely incredible memoir by one of my favourite people in the whole wide world, and I'm just going to waffle on about her while you're all joining us, so thank you very much. I'm very glad to have you all here. I'm going to let Alex join us in a second. There you are! Hi!
I'm ridiculously excited.
I know, it's like normally we would be in a very big, very busy room swaying, and I'd be struggling to get to you across a sea of people, and here you are.
I know, I can't believe it.
Oh, I went and got changed. I got changed into my rainbow pajamas in celebration of the rainbow familyness of your book.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I'm totally overwhelmed by doing an Insta Live.
I know.
I've done Zooms this week. No one talked to me for the first 8 months of lockdown because I was in the writing stage, and now I feel like I'm Jean-Michel Jarre with all my screens and my keyboards.
Just remember to turn them off.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't want like Big Brother uncut. We don't want to get too much reality. I've also made myself a cocktail in celebration of you.
I'm having a Negroni in a Scotch glass.
That's fine. Listen, it's 2020. The fact that you're using a glass is 2021. Sorry, God. Still, I'm having a Manhattan. Can I just do a cheers to you and your incredible book?
And cheers to everyone as well. I feel like so buoyed up by the weight of loving people this week. So,
well, you have been, and you are being, and you will continue to be, because your book is all about love. I'm going to embarrass you a wee bit while you're here. So for those who don't know, who are joining us for the first time, Alex's memoir is an incredible memoir. It's like no other I've ever read. Memoirs are supposed to be personal, supposed to be intimate, supposed to be revealing, and so many of them aren't. They're coy and they hide, or they dress it up as a debut novel. But this is incredibly powerful, incredibly direct, incredibly generous. It takes us right to the heart of her, the heart that's on the cover of the book. We wince at every needle as she reveals what IVF is really like, and rejoice with her as she gets the family that she's given so much for. And when her partner begins to question their gender and starts to transition, this wee family is put to the test. It's an astonishing book, and I remember when you sent me the proof of it. God, when was that now? 18 months ago? Something like that.
Yeah, no, yeah, just the end of 2019.
And for people who don't know, the book is dedicated, in fact, to me and Mike, who is also watching. So, I've known you for, how long now? Over a decade? 15 years? Something like that. And I've lived with you through lots of these events. And yet I found whole new aspects of the story that you were able to tell, and through your reflection, through the way that you wrote it. So it's, you know, even for somebody who's lived through it with you, it's still incredibly revealing and finds these new truths. So I have to keep congratulating you about it, because it is incredible. And I'm going to make you beam now, because I'm reading some of the things that are on Amazon, the good things that are on Amazon, because it is only
Oh my
good.
God, I've been so disciplined. I haven't looked.
Oh, well, see, I've looked for you. I've been furiously updating and checking it. I'm like, do you want to know where it is now? It's in the top 2,000, and it's number 8 in anthropology and sociology, number 8 in family and social groups. And by the end of this live, it will be number 1. So here are some of the things that people have said about it. David Nichols said that it is insightful and wise, generous and kind. Brian E. Gordon said, it took my breath away. It's such a beautiful book, so full of compassion and kindness, even in its furious honesty. And then this is one of my favorites. This is from Naomi Alderman, who, you know, we just wish she could take over the running of the country. She's incredible. Naomi said, a brave, thoughtful and timely book, calming and inspiring on our different relationships with our bodies, and vitally compassionate on trans rights. So, and then there are about 50 other amazing quotes. How does that make you feel, apart from slightly mortified?
It makes me feel slightly mortified, and I think I'm very relieved, because although it was slightly agonizing for a while when the book was finished and ready to go, but because of how publishing schedules work, there was a massive gap during the pandemic for me to panic about all the eventualities. But I am in, now that we've reached January, despite there being no bookshops open, I'm really glad that I had the space and time to sort of sit with, to sort of reconcile myself to the variety of responses there would be to publication, and also to kind of let it breathe a bit, to come out after a lot of the sort of political stuff had unfurled, as it was always going to. So yeah, I'm proud and relieved that it's been allowed to stand on its own.
It's been wonderful watching readers get in touch with you on Instagram and on Twitter. You know, normally you'd see them at events, but, you know, people are taking the time to write to you and talk to you about what kind of impact the book has had on them. Can you share some of those responses with us? Or give us a sense of what they are.
It's been really interesting where they've gone as well. That I've had a few things on Twitter but most people have contacted me by email or Instagram. And I don't know whether it's because I've always seen Twitter as more of a worky space, so I've shared less of myself there historically. So I don't know if the people that I've talked to on Instagram over the years have felt more invested, or if it feels like less of a political environment. But the emails and the messages that I've had there have been, they've been a massive relief, to be honest, because it feels like I've reached the people that I wanted to reach. So I've heard from people who've sort of said they hadn't really kind of built up the mettle to kind of engage with the subject at all of the trans elements. But also I've heard from my old readers as well. I've always had such a sort of two-way relationship with the readers of Running Like a Girl and Lee Pin, where I wrote the book and then they went out and ran marathons when they were grieving or supporting people who were suffering from cancer, or they've gone on to kind of get over IVF and report back 2 years later when it didn't work out, but they're just glowing with happiness about something else. And to still keep that kind of circular dialogue with those readers has been a massive relief, that they all just didn't go, what? I thought you were going to do cycling.
This is a bit left field.
Yeah, and I've heard from families of trans people as well. And the thing that's been a massive weight off my shoulders, that I've heard from people who have been in relationships with trans people and have either stayed or not stayed, and parents of trans people who said, a thank you for being as honest about the difficult times as I have, because that felt like obviously the most high stakes thing to do. You couldn't write the book without kind of going all in and telling the truth, but obviously
you could
you couldn't
really
write a book
done
of
that,
integrity. And so I really wanted to to be honest, but that did involve writing, you know, some of the darkest thoughts that I thought on my worst days on the page, and knowing that could then be filleted out and used differently for different reasons. But the response I've had from other families with trans people in them, in whatever capacity, has been, thank you for saying that. And I hadn't thought of this, but they'd said that the instinct to just cover everything in rainbows and say everything's wonderful, love is all you need, just #be kind, is strong. You want to protect the people you love, but also it can put a lot of pressure on you to not feel the thoughts that you're entitled to have or to feel. And so in some respect, providing an outlet and providing an insight into the fact that it's been a journey, I didn't just go, cool. Has been, I'm just so glad that I haven't had 600 emails from people saying, I can't believe you've said you found this difficult.
I think that you're very honest about the difficulties and the problems and those dark days that you mentioned, in how they affect you and how they affect your partner and how they affect your child. But you're not, it's not about a process of allocating blame or indeed of signalling virtue. It's a process of mutual discovery, and I think that's one of the most important parts of the book. I mean, what was it like for you writing about these experiences so close to them? Because we're not talking about 10 or 20 years ago. We're talking about the very near, almost present, in fact. What was that like?
It was like the final part of solidifying how I felt and thought about it all, because when I sold the book, some of the offers were for quite a different kind of book. They did want maybe more of a overtly mass market memoir of just that story of my marriage, basically, and my family, with, you know, photograph inserts and things like that, which I didn't want to do, because I don't think it's possible to see just what happened to our family without the prism of the things I'd written about in the past and the relationship that I had with my readers, and what happened with the harmony test. I don't know I imagine not very many people have read the book.
Can you just explain a little bit about what happened with that?
So if you pick the story up at the end of Leave In, I'd reconciled myself to the fact that my last embryo wouldn't work, and it did. So I was pregnant and also starting to do all the publicity for Leap In. And so I was very anxious that I didn't want to tell anyone I was pregnant until I knew it was a viable pregnancy. But the NHS didn't have space for me to have a 12-week test until I was like going to be 14 or 15 weeks pregnant. And I knew, because of my age, I was a geriatric pregnancy. The basic blood tests that the NHS do would probably come back saying that I was at risk, and I probably end up having to have an amniocentesis, which I didn't want to have because of the risk of miscarriage. So I paid a fucking fortune. Oh, it's nice to say that. I couldn't say that on Women's Hour. To have a DNA test. It's called the Harmony test, and most people have it to find out the sex of the child, the embryo, the fetus. I can't remember when an embryo becomes a fetus. It used to seem very important, but now that it's somebody that smears pomegranate on the kitchen walls, it doesn't seem important at all. And I had that test, and I never got to the bottom of it because I stopped talking to that clinic, but they came back and told me that I shared no DNA with the child. And I was at that point about 8 or 9 weeks pregnant. So it threw up massive possibilities. It threw up the possibility that the child was not mine, but was my ex's with somebody else, or that it was 2 other people entirely's embryo. Where was our embryo? Had it been used? Had it been born while we were trying all the other ones? And also it put me in a very specific position of insight into what was sort of coming a bit further down the line about taking hormones and messing with nature to do what you feel is right for you. I perceived myself to be someone who would be a mother and who would be a good and deserving mother. So I took hormones and medical intervention to allow me to do that. It was not controversial, and it was available to me on the NHS. 40 years ago, IVF was where trans lives are now in many ways, with far-right Christian groups banging on the door telling you you're immoral, and people trying to rationalize that messing with nature would end with us all, you know, in bed with the devil. And there were a few moments then when I did think I was in bed with the devil, and I thought I might be about to have someone else's baby.
Hi, Rosemary.
But it felt like I can never obviously understand what it is to live a trans life, but I felt like I was on the threshold of that world, like someone had whipped away the velvet curtain and I was allowed to see into a set of emotions that I could never have conceived of otherwise. And I was also assaulted on a train when I was very heavily pregnant, and that led to a court case which the guy who admitted to having like a laughable shopping list of like something like 10 pints, 10 gin and tonics, 2 bottles of white wine, and the magistrate said in the court that it would be really awful for him to be found guilty. There was still a chance he hadn't done it, even if I thought he'd done it. It would be awful to be wrongly accused. And yes, he had a lot to drink, but I was pregnant, and that might mean I was really quite emotional. So it was better to go with not guilty. And that just floored me, to be told something that I absolutely knew was true by the system, the man, the structures that you grow up believing are in place to protect you. And so they all informed each other a lot. And so it was impossible to kind of go into the writing of the book without bearing them all in mind, which was why I wanted to do a slightly different book than just straight memoir. It had to be coming at it from an angle that I felt was the interesting one, rather than just sort of selling my family as the main attraction. Yeah. I mean, obviously I understand that this first week of press has put the biggest gaze onto them, but I think when people start reading it, they will understand that the story was wider and the themes are broader. How
do they feel about it?
My son is delighted. He has been swaggering around telling everyone that I write a book about loving everyone, which in Brighton in a pandemic, I'm probably going to have Priti Patel on my doorstep soon. But yeah, and my ex has been really supportive. She hasn't read it, and I do understand that. I don't think I would like to read someone else's description of my most troublesome time. I wouldn't like to read it from someone else's perspective. And there was a sort of awkward point towards the end of the publication process where my editor was like, well, if she isn't going to read it, she does have to tell us that we have consent to publish, because there is still an outsized chance that you did just make all of this up. And it was in many ways the most sort of sisterly thing she could ever have done for me, because she wrote to Chatto and, you know, this sort of lawyer letter and said, I completely trust her. I've seen the process she's gone through with her past books, and I hope you will reach as many people as possible. And that felt like the kind of full stop on a kind of process of redeveloping and reaffirming and reassessing what had been a friendship and then a marriage and is now an uncategorizable family relationship. So,
well, you say uncategorizable. I mean, I you know, my parents are no longer together and they have a very good relationship now, but you know, the story of your divorce, or the ending, because you're not divorced, but the end of the relationship that you began together is so overwhelmingly positive. I mean, you're making it overwhelming. It's not even something that's just happened, and you know, it's an ongoing process of working. It's human and it's messy and it's all of those things. But you know, you've made a choice. You know, because I remember at the time, and you touch on this in the book, but you know, having a partner who's transitioning, you know, a lot of people decide that they want to have a point of view on that, you know, and that they think you should be, and they still do. And I know that's something that you've experienced since publication, is that people think that in some senses, you know, you're a victim of domestic violence and you just don't know it. You've been gaslit somehow. It was by your partner.
It was interesting because I felt like what has happened over the sort of 2 years of traumatic things was that a kind of, it was felt like a sequence of my agency being taken away from me. So the process of IVF is quite dispiriting anyway, if you've got any kind of like romantic sense. Like, you grow up and you're told, like, if you do it right and you're sexy enough and you know, all these kind of romantic dreams you're sold that will, and then you get a baby at the end, and then suddenly it's like a series of doctor's appointments and blood tests and injections, and pain and physical pain, and also a sense of powerlessness. Like, deciding to have IVF is an active choice that felt good at the time, because I didn't want to get to post-menopause and not feel like I'd kind of given everything my best shot. But also to start it does, in your 3 o'clock in the morning dark days, feel like a sort of admission of defeat on the part of your body to some degree. And then the harmony test thing felt like, well, was that like the world saying, well, you meddled? And there was a powerlessness to having, I then had a C-section, because I had quite a difficult pregnancy. It turned out I had something with my uterus, like a bicornate uterus. I
love the way you just say that and then just like move on really quickly. I mean, that
I know, like, there's no shortage of people discussing trauma on screens at the moment. Like,
Can I just talk about that scene in the book, though, where I'm going to paraphrase here, but I think you say something like it was a feeling like pulling washing out of a washing machine. That was how you. That was how you talked about.
It feels like having a C-section.
That image is never going to leave me. That image is never going to leave me.
Yeah, you're aware of distant rummaging, but you don't know.
Rummaging.
But it was, again, it was a sort of putting. It made me feel like, you know, don't worry, the men will deal with it. And then the whole thing with the court case, and then sort of, obviously it wasn't deliberate, but part of making a decision to transition, not decision is not the right word, and we're all still in the process of finding the right sequence of words for that, but to find out that news after I'd had the baby did definitely leave me with a sense of, why tell me now? And I don't see it like that at all now, because my child is my most treasured and cherished thing in my whole life, and there's absolutely nothing that I would change that for. But it did feel like a series of, and they weren't all male decisions. Many of the doctors that, and especially in the IVF clinic, were women. It did feel like all of these decisions had happened, and I'd kind of been rendered powerless, and so it felt like it had to be a very active series of decisions and responses that I made, because all I had at that point was how I reacted. So I took it really seriously. It was like, I felt like, because it was around the same time that Notre Dame was that huge fire, and I remember looking at the news and thinking, I really feel like that. Like, do you remember all the wood vanished? Yes. And there was just a stone structure, and people are like, it's been there for 1,300 years, and I felt like that.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to try to do the most empathetic thing, but also to like work out what was the right thing to do for my family, what was manageable for me. And so some people didn't really understand what I was sort of trying to process, and some people took me. I think what was really difficult is when there's a breakup, there's normally a script. We have so much pop culture. There's barely a top 10 music chart without breakups. There's, half the female commercial fiction industry doesn't exist. Like, we have very, very worn tracks on how to break up with people. And a lot of that is your family and friends becoming fucking livid on your behalf. And I didn't feel like that, because I could see a very direct line between anti-trans sentiment and why you would not want to believe that of yourself, and why you would keep that and pressure that down in yourself until you were the geyser that burst. There was never, even in my darkest hour, there was never part of me that couldn't see how close those two things were connected. And I've got family and friends and so many people who I've either been through the process of coming out with, more in a gay lesbian context, but that I kind of understood. I understand. I already understood very clearly that it's not a decision that you wake up one day and kind of. It's not like writing a novel where you're like, I'm just gonna have to get down to this today, get that first page done. It's, you know, you reach a breaking point, and
it's a lifelong process.
Yeah.
You know, every day is coming out day. You know, every day is coming out day.
And now that is part of my life as well. And that played a huge part in why I wanted to write the book, because there was this sort of narrative, especially because people knew that I'd had IVF because I'd written about it, that was sort of, I could sort of feel like 2 steps away from me. There was a sort of narrative starting to form that, you know, she got her baby and then she just buggered off. And I didn't want to bear that because it wasn't true, but also I am not ashamed of what happened. I'm not ashamed of my ex and any of her choices. I'm not ashamed of myself, and I am never going to be ashamed of the position that our son is in. And if you don't talk about stuff, it does let the sort of moldy, mildewy smell in. And I just wanted to let light in and say, this has happened, because there's nothing more exhausting than trying to keep a secret or trying to direct a narrative while not actually speaking about it. And I couldn't live like that anyway. I mean, terrible, you know, would rather tell you what your Christmas presents were on Christmas Eve.
You're a blotter.
But yeah, I did feel like really that there's nothing for any of us to be ashamed of. And also, what would the alternative be? What would people have us do? Like pretend it was the 1800s and that everything was fine. Everything's completely fine, guys, and just carry on. What's it? It's like seek a prosecution. Try and deny trans or queer people millennia of existence and culture, and it's just, there was the path was perfectly obvious. It just took me a while to
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is, you it's not a path that you're following, it's a path that you're forging. And I think that's a distinction that's very important. And I think one of the things that the book does is, you know, forge that path more widely, and you're inviting people to come along on it with you. And I think that's really important.
I'd say the path has definitely been forged. I've heard from people all along this process, even when I was still doing publicity events for Leap In. Once I talked about it a tiny bit on Instagram, that was all it took, and people would send press note, like folded up this big, into the palm of my hand when I signed a book, and they would say, don't worry, it's happened to me too, or I think it's happening to me. And there are women who have been going through this and making brilliant families out of it. There are women who've chosen different paths as well, but there are women who have found warm. And I was interviewed by somebody today whose husband came out as gay when her daughter was very young, and she said to me at the end, she was like, don't worry, she's 20 now, you've done the right thing. So I don't feel like I don't feel like I'm forging the path. What I hope I'm doing is walking along the path with my other you know, compatriots on the path, but like letting off flares. Going, it's okay, we're here and it's fine. And not just to people with trans people in their families, but to anyone who has had that experience of walking into a baby play class and looked around the room and thought, is my family safe here? If we all turn up together, will we still be welcome here?
But these are new calculations for you, Alex, aren't they, though? And this is the thing that I think that's very interesting, is that you're a person who in their life, you know, as a white, cis, able-bodied, middle-class woman, you know, and, you know, not, of course, your life's not been without challenges, and you've written about that, but you've gone from a place of, you know, really great privilege to a place of having to negotiate safety. And to do that kind of emotional and
don't get me wrong, I was used to negotiating safety, but it was in a completely different context.
Yes, of course.
As a woman, especially with running and stuff, you know, I was very used to the whole, you know, running with your keys in your fist type thing. But those are situations that you have grown up acclimatized to. And this was, you know, you're not supposed to feel afraid when you're going to baby swimming. But there are still people at baby swimming who can make you feel like you're really not welcome in the world, let alone baby swimming.
Yeah.
Poor old baby swimming. Nobody was ever awful at baby swimming. It's just an example of something
but you're not just thinking about you though. You're thinking about your son, and you know, and you're thinking about, you know, your ex as well. If you're in shared social situations, I mean, I guess it's very different. But if it's just you and the wee one, or whether you're there together.
Yeah, and I also feel really strongly that to support Dee is to support us all. What life does my son have if he grows up understanding that something innate is to be judged and shunned and cut out of the world? Like, and I just don't want to hang out with anyone who thinks that, let alone create someone who thinks like that. And so yeah, and that was one of the biggest burdens of mental what's it called, I hear people saying emotional admin, was that kind of constant checking. And you know, the thing of when you take a child to the doctor and you say, you know, what about this, and you say no, and the mother, and then, you know, there's a whole world of linguistic chaos that as a society and a people we are still unraveling, and it's really contentious. But I always was trying to be clear but also fair. And you know, things like I went to my son's nursery, and I've consistently kept up with making sure that there are books and representations there, that he doesn't feel like he's the only person whose family isn't shaped like a family should be shaped like. Because we exist, and we're valid, and it's not like a question of like creating a fantasy. Like, we definitely are alive, and it definitely has happened.
You've definitely put him to bed, hopefully an hour ago,
and it's going to carry on happening. I'm not the last family that this situation will happen to, and I certainly wasn't the first. So yeah.
I'm just going to say, if anybody's got any questions, now is a good time to think about asking them. I'm just going to quickly scroll back through. Your Negroni's nearly done, Alex, and so is my Manhattan.
It's okay.
Uh-oh, but she's prepared.
I made double.
I have taught you well. I'm so proud. It's actually just like a constant stream of love hearts and trust and love, and lots of people just being absolutely lovely. Bookish Beck says she's 2/3 of the way through the book now and really enjoying it. Correct.
Thank
Correct
you.
response, Beck. Somebody, Spargo78 says, I'm so glad you resisted the structure of the book as it is so original.
Oh, thank you.
Libby Jackson wonders when the triathlon trilogy is going to be complete. She's kind of got her hands full right now, Libby. There's a novel to finish, I think probably by the end of next week, as well as the promo for this. So
I don't think there'll ever be a triathlon trilogy. That was what people wanted when I wanted to write this. But I definitely fell in love with cycling during this period, and I want to do more of it. And but one big thing that's happened to me as a part of the last 2 or 3 years is less enthusiasm for quantifying myself. So where 10 years ago I was finding massive solace and ambition and grit and discovering things about myself that I never knew I had through kind of repeated marathons and trying to get faster and go further, and I know I know what I can do. I'm proud of myself. I don't need to keep chipping time off it or adding distance to it. So the thought of kind of doing a triathlon, I really want to go to Paris. I want to be able to cycle to Paris. Okay. My family cycled to France when we were children, and I tell you what, it's the greatest movie never made.
It sounds like the Griswolds. It sounds like National Lampoon. Also, I'm just going to say, you can put your bike on a train and nobody's going to judge you. I
know what my body can do, and it's get to St Pancras.
A question from C. Samueline, who says, how did your family feel and support you? I know they've always been amazing, but just curious. So actually, I think your mum is watching. I think that's monograms right there. So we'll have to be very careful.
Yeah, and my sister.
And your sister and your brother. They were all amazing.
It.
They were all amazing. From the day you were born, they've been incredible. They've never, ever done anything wrong or upsetting at all.
And I think they're incredible. They're incredible. I mean, that's all I've got to say. No, they have been amazing. And thank you for joining in, family. But what I think is really worth noting is that my family is Catholic. I was raised in a Catholic family. And it's been interesting on its own to watch my parents sort of reject their politics during the Brexit situation anyway, because they're like, my mum's now a Guardian reader, which is absolutely insane. But also it made me realise how much capacity for good and understanding and forgiveness and just like wrangling with new concepts there is. And that having a curious mind and doing some reading and that kind of thing it's not you when none of us are as tribal as we think we are, and that was proved in bucket loads. And I found that it was an enormous relief. You're right there.
I'm just plugging you in because my phone has got too excited and slightly used all its battery.
I feel like I'm supporting you.
You are, as always. Go on.
But it made me realise that people who choose bigotry, a particularly publicly stated bigotry,
which is a choice,
are making an active choice. Because there could have been paths where my parents or my family chose anger, and let's not beat around the bush. They definitely drove down some angry roads sometime. But they didn't end up in destination anger. And that is a testament to what it's possible to be and believe and all that. And I found that really inspiring because obviously I live in Brighton and I was better supported in understanding the sort of gnarlier concepts. So
a really good question from Alistair up in Edinburgh, who asks how important was the period of reflection between proof and publishing. It's a very inside-degree question, but it's a really good one. And I know that, you know, when you were sending me drafts of the book, you know, you'd finished and then I'd get, this is the final. I'm definitely not making any more changes on Tuesday, you know, and it got, you know, and I got to the point where I said to you, I was like, please stop sending different versions. We will send me the finished version, you know, and then you did, but you did take a long time. And there were some, I think, quite really important revisions that you did and processes that you went through. And I wonder if you could just talk about that.
Well, the most important thing about that process is that it was largely done during the first lockdown when my ex had moved back in. So instead of being in a kind of hideous, endless, wrangling, litigious mess, I was able to go, are you all right with that term? Is that like shout?
Is that all right?
And that was, at times, it was a massive pressure to be going through pages that were of the really difficult days, and not just around the marriage, but around the assault and the harmony test stuff, to be reading those things at a point where all of our brains are in this absolutely hyper anxious, we weren't sure if our families were going to live. You know, I think we're better accustomed to it now, even though arguably what's going on is worse. Then we were in a sort of state of shock and terror, and so to have that headspace repeated was emotionally really challenging. But from a practical level, with the book and with being able to be to be much less confrontational than perhaps other people who've had to legal their books have endured, it was joyful, and it felt like a real act of trust as well. And then there was I sent it to some academics to read as well, to kind of and a trans couple. It was a trans man and his girlfriend, and then all the Black Lives Matter stuff happened, and there were some jokes in the original draft which it was an amazing exercise in context, because there was some stuff around about how with the court case, one of the reasons I decided to take it to court was because I was really aware of, I know it's just a dogged, tatty old remnant of a word, I was so aware of my privilege that I was the kind of person that that courts like. That's just undeniable. And I'd sort of put some jokes in about how I'm the sort of person that when you ask to speak to the manager comes, and stuff like that. And then my editor was like, we need a Karen edit. We really need a Karen edit. These jokes don't work anymore.
The world needs a Karen edit.
Sorry about the no Karen-y jokes, guys, but I'm glad I did it.
No, I think that I think, you know, with memoir, it's really important that writers have that time, because it's a process of, you know, that process of getting on the page isn't just remembering, it is reliving, you know, and it can be re-traumatizing. And I think that you need to, you know, it takes a lot out of you to get to that stage, and you've got to do that, get it on the page, and then step away from it, you know, and not look at it and not be in the feelings of it. And you can then go back to it and look at it as a piece of writing. You know,
it took a long time before I could do that. Because
hard.
Obviously it's like the ultimate edition of, you know, when you have like a minor fracas with someone by the shopping trolleys in Sainsbury's, and then as you walk away you think of the killer line that you should have used. And so writing a memoir is the ultimate version of that. So you get to go back and go, no, actually I'm going to say that what I said was this, and the temptation is to keep going and keep perfecting yourself. But also it is, there were, when I started writing it, there were like angry, resentful little sentences to all sorts of people that I really wanted to kind of get down, and I'd kind of had voice notes on my phone and written notes. I mean, even I think the back of the book is like a voice written note that I took loads as just like, I imagined characters in novels or whatever that they could be, and then the first version of the book had all of that stuff in, and actually some of it didn't stay because the act of writing it down, giving it a chapter heading, putting a little page number and sending it off was all I needed. And also the thing that I will be eternally grateful for, that I don't think I appreciated quite as much when I sold the book, was that my editor does a variety of women's voices. I consciously did not want to be part of someone else's agenda. The whole point of the book was me rediscovering my voice and making conscious choices about how I wanted to spend basically the second half of my life. And my editor does Caroline Criado-Prez, who has like really specific, amazing, but very, very of the body. And you know, rightly so, but also very specific. And somebody's putting Becky H. Yes, Becky H. But she also does, at quite the other end of the spectrum, Susan Hill and also Margaret Atwood. So at every point when she questioned me in the edits, I felt extremely confident and comfortable that she genuinely wanted to know what I meant and that I was expressing myself clearly. It was never kind of a, what we really find works in the home counties is, or no, that's not what you think. And that's not how we work here. And so I felt like I was my best self in the book. Like the process that I went through editorially was the best. I mean, it's the best book ever. What I mean is the best for me emotionally and psychologically. It is me. It is not anybody else's agenda.
And that's a really important, powerful thing to be able to say at the end of a memoir. When it's been, you know, umpteen editors, legaled, you're thinking about all the other people in your life. You know, I think, you know, the memoirs that really connect with an audience and endure over time are those where the writer has put themselves out there with all their flaws. And, you know, you do that with your, you know, you share your fears, you share those dark moments where you just don't know where it's going to, you don't know how it's going to turn out, you know. And then you're really honest about that. Particularly, I think in the IVF chapters, you know, you talk consciously about resisting that narrative of you're only successful if you have a baby, you're only a good woman if you become a mother, and you know, you call that out, and that really connected with me as a gay man. And I think I will say it's an incredible memoir, and I'm really proud of you as a writer and as a friend. I'm so proud of you. And I've loved watching it make its way into the world. So thank you for doing it, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Oh my goodness, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry that my picture my son did fell off the wall earlier. It's his Matisse.
It is. Every child is in Matisse, aren't they? Can we just do another toast again to somebody to love?
And to everybody who's read it and been in touch.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us. Alex's book is available to pre-order from your favourite local independent bookshops, and you can find a list of those. There it is. You can find a list of those on our salon website. If you enjoyed tonight and you want more chat with authors, Alex is actually going to be at our next salon, which is in February. You can get tickets.
I bought a ticket.
You've got a ticket. Thank you very much for getting one. I'm very impressed that you did that. We've got, it's going to be featuring this amazing book, All the Young Men, by Ruth Coker Burks. I'll just read you from the back. In 1986, 26-year-old Ruth visits a friend in hospital. She notices that the door to one of the patient's rooms is painted red. The nurses are reluctant to enter. Ruth goes into that room, and there she finds a young man who is dying of AIDS. His death changes her life. It's an incredible memoir, really incredible.
Who's publishing it?
Sorry, who's publishing it? That's a really good question. I never remember publishers. You always do. It's Trapeze. So, and the one publicist is Mora.
I'm going to hit them up.
It's really, it's an incredible book. And she'll be joined by Russell T. Davis, who is the creator of It's a Sin, which starts on the 22nd of January, which is about that whole generation of gay and bisexual men and the people around them who were devastated by HIV/AIDS. So it's going to be, that's in February, and you can get tickets on our salon profile or on our website or on Eventbrite or anywhere you like. That will be lovely. So thank you everybody for joining us. Get your hands on Somebody to Love as soon as you can. Alex, get that glass filled up. I'll see you later on. Lots of love. Bye.
Cheers, bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye. Thank you so much for joining me and Alexandra Heminsley for the launch of Somebody to Love. You will probably have, seen her in The Guardian or heard her on Women's Hour or saw her in The Times. She's everywhere at the moment, but this is a book that is really going to endure. It is incredible and it's her best yet, and I'm very proud to call her a friend and delighted that she could join us at the salon. You can find out more about Alex and her book on our website www.theliterarysalon.co.uk, where you can also subscribe to our newsletter and find out what we've got going on next. Thank you so much for joining us. Happy reading!